wanted to talk about free agency
Sure.
a little bit. Who's one free agent you think could really help the Pistons? Maybe one free agent that you would target for the Pistons this summer.
So I know we've talked a lot about star hunting, right? And that not even star hunting's too big of a term. Finding a guy that can come in and get buckets and be a second option off of Cade, even if it's not perfect, it helps other guys fit into roles. But a guy that I've kind of fallen in love with that doesn't fit that is Najee Marshall. I really like Najee Marshall. And again, this is another role player, and we've kind of beat down the role player thing here, but they still are important. I think Najee is due for a step forward when he gets out of the shadow of really good players. And that's why I think that he could take another step is he's playing behind really good players. He's not a guy that's an eighth man because of like Herb Jones and Brandon Ingram and Trey Murphy are really good players, and there just wasn't a ton of minutes for him. I think he can really defend. He can shoot it enough. So Najee Marshall is a player I would really like to see them prioritize. Outside of I keep going back and forth with Malik Monk. I love Malik Monk so much, and I'm trying to put just my love for his game aside and decide how much he makes sense here because he's not a great defender. He's not even a good defender. I don't know if he's a neutral defender, but I think he can get buckets. I think he passes. I think he's an underrated passer. If you look at the stats, it tells you that. But if you watch the games, it tells you that even more. I do think that there is a role that makes sense for him. But with every one of these moves, it's like, what does it mean for this player already? What would that mean for Jaden Ivey if you brought in Malik Monk, right?
Right.
I love Isaiah Hartenstein. What does that mean for Jalen Duren? I think Nick Claxton could make some sense. Again, what does that mean for Jalen Duren? So I think it's really hard to talk about one individual player for the Pistons in the offseason because there's so many big picture moves that have to coincide with it, if that makes sense. Like if they're going to trade for Brandon Ingram, I want to know what other moves are coming. Because if you're going to make an investment in Brandon Ingram, I want to see this team really try to like really improve. Because you're going to pay that dude $40 to $50 million for the next 4 years after this upcoming season because he's extension eligible. Yeah. And so I want to know how else are they going to build this around to start, again, not win playoff series, but get yourself there. So
I've been on the Malik Monk train for probably a couple of months. But to your point, you said something and it made me laugh. His highlights do not match his stats.
Yes.
Because you watch a highlight reel and it seems like, oh, this guy's like a 20-point per game scorer. Yep. And then you look at the highlights and it's like, oh, only 15? Like, yep. That's kind of weird. I'm not going to have a hot take like Brandon Jennings had saying that if Malik Monk basically had the same minutes as Donovan Mitchell, he's better than Donovan Mitchell because I don't believe that. Wholeheartedly, I don't. But I do think, to your point, he's a bucket getter. Defensively, I mean, I think he's average. I'm not going to say he's like a poor defender.
Yeah, neutral's probably fair, right? Maybe we can agree on that. Neutral.
Yeah, he's average. I like the Najee Marshall name drop because I know because I got told that they almost actually traded for Najee Marshall before they tried to trade for Simone Fontecchio.
Okay.
So, I mean, maybe there's something there that the front office liked there. I like that name because I think he's a 3-and-D wing that they can plug and play, kind of maybe a cheaper option, if you will. Maybe go get Gary Trent. I don't know. He's younger.
I literally was looking up his stats as we were talking because I'm like, okay, does Gary Trent actually make just as much sense as Malik Monk, right? I don't know. And maybe it comes down to price, but Gary Trent, is average 18, 17 points a game in his career, is actually a better shooter from three just based on percentage on not quite as much volume. I don't think he's nearly as good a passer, but if we just want a guy to come in and get buckets, that's a really nice name.
And he's young too.
Yes.
He's not too old. I think he's
25.
25. Yeah. I mean, yep. I think if you kind of look at the two guards in free agency, I mean, like, I don't really think Buddy Hield's going to come to Detroit personally. I think he's just going to go for whatever veteran team is most likely to make the playoffs and have a deep playoff run. I don't think they will go after Klay Thompson, even though he makes sense. But I mean, I think at this stage of his career, I think he's more suited again, like maybe like an Orlando makes sense for him. Just a team that's made the playoffs and needs more shooting. But it's really hard when you look at these free agents and you're like, so underwhelming. Like, we're not getting Paul George. We're not getting Siakam. To the Tobias Harris talk, I know fans don't like just because of what the contract may look like and kind of his performance in the playoffs. But Tobias Harris is a consistent player.
The contract is the thing with Tobias, right?
Yeah.
I'm okay with Tobias being like a plan B, plan C, and on a short-term contract, because I do think he plays a position at the forward that this team needs. But I would rather them target maybe somebody like Patrick Williams, who's a restricted free agent for the Bulls. I think there's mixed views on Obi Toppin. I kind of like Obi Toppin. He doesn't solve the defensive issues is a big thing with Obi, but I could understand Tobias, and I don't know that Tobias solves a bunch of the defensive issues either, but if you just want to get better, maybe you could give him a Bruce Brown type contract where it's a 1+1, but really it's just a 1. And I don't know that they're going to be able to fully competently spend all $65 million this offseason. What I also like is not the Joe Harrison contract, but is there a contract out there that you could bring in that's a dude that's overpaid, but is still a good basketball player? He's just not as good as what the contract says anymore. So I don't know who that name is. One that comes up a lot is Andrew Wiggins. The problem with Wiggins is it's got so many years on it is the issue with Wiggins. And some would argue, like, is he even still a good basketball player at this point? It's so sad to see. I don't know what's gone on, and I assume it's his personal life or whatever that has messed him up so mentally. So, first off, I just hope Andrew Wiggins is okay beyond basketball. But somebody like that, there was a name. I was going to look through the rosters real quick because there's another player I've talked about before that fit that mold.
Levine.
Yeah, Levine is another one. Levine's thing is the injuries, though, right?
Yeah.
And how many years is left on Levine's contract? 2?
I can look that up. Let's see.
He's still 3. So that's still the thing. He has a player option on the 3rd year that he probably would.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Give those numbers and see.
48 on a player option. That's like Blake Griffin-esque.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Shout out to Blake though.
I've said this. That archetype makes a lot of sense to me, though. Just a high volume scorer, floor spacer, bucket getter, all of those type of things. And is honestly why I've warmed up to Brandon Ingram a little bit. I don't think he's a perfect fit next to Cade because I think he does like to play with the ball in his hands. He likes to play in the mid-range some, but he would take pressure off in terms of scoring the ball. But yet again, you're going to probably have to commit 40 to 50 million a year to Brandon Ingram this offseason. And maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe he doesn't get that, but that sounds like what he's at least looking for.
Yeah, like I said, I think that free agency, you look at the cap space and you look at the free agents and then Pistons fans, like, dude, there's no one out there that can like really help us go from like 14 to 40 wins, which I don't think that's a realistic thing either. But
agreed.
I think there are some under the radar role players that you can fill out your bench with, get players that were like, I'll use Isaiah Livers, for example. There's going to be someone that gets overpaid that's going to fill into Isaiah Livers' role and automatically just put up points and put up production. That's what I kind of want to tell fans. Like, just because we have cap space doesn't mean we're going to use all of it in free agency. You could use a lot of it on draft night. You could use a lot of it in trades. You never really know.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're one of the more intriguing trade teams because they do have assets, young players. They have the number 5 pick. They can, if they really wanted to go in, I wouldn't advise this, but they do start to have access to future first-round picks, even with all the stuff with the protections with the Knicks. That's actually getting small enough where they can avoid the step-in rule, I believe, in 29 and then would even have 31. Again, I wouldn't advise this. I'm just saying if you wanted to go straight star hunting.